Hello everybody and welcome back. In this video we'll begin the process of formally adding functionality and UI elements to our chats page. So let's get going and let's see what we're going to be tackling first. So right now in the simulator I am running the completed version of our application, and the things that we're going to be focusing on in this video are going to be adding this top bar where we have the name of the actual page being displayed, as well as a button which will allow us to log out. So let's get going and let's see how we can do this. So the first thing that I'm going to do is that I am going to make sure that I import the authentication provider, because that's something that we actually require to get access to our logout function. So I'm going to add a import statement for our provider, and I'm going to do // and then from there providers and then authentication provider. Once that is done, the next thing that I'm going to do is that I am going to come down to my chats page state class, and here I'm going to add some of the variables that we require. So the first variable that we require is going to be our devices width and height, because we required that. So I'm going to be going here and I'm going to say that we'll have a late, and then I'm going to call it double device height, and then similar to this we'll also have a late double, and then we'll also have a device width. With this done, the next thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to create another variable which I'll call a late authentication provider, and I'm going to call this _auth. And that's pretty much all we have to do. With this, I'm going to come down to where I have my build function for my chats page, and here I'm going to copy and paste the line of code in, because we've been doing that many times, and that is going to be setting the device's height to be the height of our device, and setting the device's width variable to be the size of the width of our device. And with this, I am going to then set the auth variable to be equal to the provider .auth authentication provider call, and then inside of here I'll pass the context inside the parenthesis and do command save. Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to exit the completed version. I'm going to go on to the version that we're currently developing. So now that this is done, the next thing that we're going to be doing is that we are going to be going inside of our build UI function, and we're going to be building some stuff inside of here. So the first thing that I'm going to do is that I am going to, instead of returning a scaffold for our build UI function, just let me go to the appropriate line, I am going to return a container. And this container is going to have some attributes. The first one is going to be the padding for the container, and the padding is going to be edge insets dot, and then we're going to have symmetric. With this, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to add horizontal padding first, and I'm going to say that it's going to be the device's width, and then we're going to do times 0.03, and then I'll also have vertical, and the vertical is going to be the device's height times 0.02. So let me do that just here. With this, I'm going to do Alt-Shift-F just to reformat the code. I'm going to add a comma here just so that the reformatting looks better, and then we can move on to defining the other attributes. So I'm going to define the height for our container, and the height is going to be the device's height times 0.98, and then with this I'll also have the width, which is going to be the device's width times 0.97. And moving onwards, now I'll define the child for our container. The child for our container is going to be a column, and this column is going to have firstly the main axis sign property set, which is going to be main axis size max. With this, we'll also have the main axis alignment, which will be main axis alignment dot start, and we'll also have cross axis alignment, not children, sorry, cross axis alignment, which is going to be cross axis alignment dot center. And finally, we'll have the children's list. Inside of the children's list, the first thing that I want to have is a top bar, which is going to constitute of the title on the right side and then the logout button on the left side. And for that, since I know that this is a widget that we're going to be reusing inside of our users page as well, I'm going to be actually going to my widgets folder, and inside of here, I'm going to be then creating the custom logic for our top bar. So let's go ahead and let's do that. So I'm going to go to the widgets folder, and inside of there I'll create a new file, and I'm going to call that topbar.dart. With this, I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to import the only package that we require, which is the material package. Now that we have the material package, I'm going to create the class called topbar, and then I am going to say that it extends a stateless widget. And with this, I am now going to add in the properties for our class. The first property is going to be a string called the bar's title. And this is going to be a private property. That's why it's an underscore. With this, I'll also have an optional widget that gets passed into it, which is going to be our primary action widget. And with this, I'll also have a widget passed into us, which will be our secondary action widget. So these are just the widgets which are going to be on the right side for the primary and the left side for the secondary widget, and I'm just calling them actions. And then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to also optionally define a variable called the double size. Now I'm going to say that we'll have two late double variables called the device height and the late double device width variables. And these are also private variables denoted by the underscore. And then I'll create the actual constructor for our top bar class. Our top bar class constructor is going to have named arguments passed to it, but this time not all of them are going to be required. We'll get this dot underscore bar title passed. We'll also have this dot primary action. We'll also have this dot, and then I'll have the secondary action, and then I'll also have this dot, and then I'll have the font size. And then the font size, I haven't defined the variable yet, and that's because I didn't define the correct name for our size variable. It's going to be not size, but actually font size for the variable here. And then it's going to be this dot font size as one of the named arguments as well. So this dot font size, and then I'm going to add the remaining curly bracket at the end, which we already had, so I can just remove it. And with this, I'm going to remove the this dot bar title argument. That isn't going to be a named argument. That's actually going to be a positional argument. So I'll add it outside of our named arguments. And I'm going to say this dot underscore bar title, and then I'm going to add a comma. So basically this first argument is going to be a positional argument, and then after that we'll have our named arguments, which are optional. That's why I haven't added the required keyword to them. Keep in mind though that the positional arguments are always required. With this done, the next thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to come down and I'm going to create the build function for our top bar. And for our top bar, the build function is going to be very simple. I'm going to do a return statement, and I'm going to say that we're going to return a container. The container is going to have in height, and the height will be the device's height times 0.10, and then we'll also have a width, which is going to be the device's width times 0 device's width, and we don't have to multiply it with anything. I'm going to add a semicolon at the end here as well. But I'm seeing that we're not following the proper convention when it comes to designing UIs. And the reason for that is because we usually have a build UI function that builds complex UIs for us. And I think our top bar is one of the UI elements that's quite complex. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to extract and put this UI creation logic into its own function and call it build UI, like we've been doing before. And inside of this, I'm going to put the container, and then for my actual build methods return function, I am just going to call build UI and do command save. Now that this is done, I'm going to also copy in the 2 lines of code which are responsible for one, getting the device's height and setting it to the device height variable, and getting the device's width and setting it to the device width, and do command save as well. With this, the next thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to my build UI function container. I'm going to add a child to it, and this time I'm going to add a row. So this row widget is going to allow us to place multiple widgets inside of it in a horizontal manner. I'm going to say that it's going to have a main axis size of max. It's going to have a main axis alignment of main axis alignment dot space between, and then it'll have a cross axis alignment of cross axis alignment dot center. And then with this, what we can do is that we can move onwards with defining the children. So the children for our row are going to be a secondary action, a primary action, and then a title bar. So what I'm going to say is that I'm going to say if for some reason we get a secondary action passed in and it's not equals to null. So if we have a secondary action widget that gets passed into the constructor, then we're going to put that inside of our children's list by doing this kind of if check and then adding a exclamation mark at the end and then doing a comma. So this is a feature that's supported in Dart, where we are essentially saying that if this condition is true, which means that if the secondary action is not equal to null, then we'll place the secondary action inside of our children's list. Then we'll have our title bar. That's always going to be there. So what's the title bar? Well, that's a function that we're going to just define in the second. And then I'll have another if statement where I'll say that if our primary action is not equals to null, then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to add the primary action to our list as well. Now comes the final part, and that's just defining a function, which is what we're going to call our title bar. And then inside of here, I'm just going to add the curly brackets for it. I am going to return a text widget, and then the text widget is going to have for its text value the bar title passed to it. And with this, we are also going to define a overflow property for it. So we're going to say that if the text overflow, then we want to do ellipsis. And then finally, we'll have a text style. So what's the style for our text? And that's going to be text style. And then it's going to be color, text style, and then it's going to be color, and then colors.white. And then font size is going to be font size, and then the width for our font. And then finally, the last thing is going to be the font weight. So how the thickness of our font is, and that's going to be font weight.w 700. With this, I'll do Alt-Shift-F, Command Save, and our top bar is done. So our top bar is just simply a bro widget, essentially, which might or might not have these two widgets placed inside of it. And in between these two widgets, we'll have a title bar. So now I'll go back to my chats page. And here what I'm going to do is that I'm going to import my widget. So after my providers, I'm going to come down and I'm going to say that we are importing widgets here. And these widgets are going to be import .. and then I'm going to say widgets, and then I'm going to say top bar. And with this, I'm going to do Command Save. Now I'm going to come down to where we have the build UI function and we're defining the children for our column. And I'm going to add the first child here. And the first child is going to be our top bar widget, which requires us to give it a title. So now if I pass in a title and I do a comma at the end, that's the only required argument that we had to give was a title, and do Command Save, you're going to see that we get the chat's title passed into us. But apart from this, I also like to define for our top bar the primary action as well. So to do that, I'm going to add the primary action named argument, and then I'm going to say that our primary action is going to be an icon button. And as you know, the primary action just is concerned with us providing it a widget. So I'm going to say that the icon button, and the icon for that is going to be an icon widget. And that icon widget is going to have icons.logout as its value. And then with this, we are also going to define the color for our actual icon, and that's going to be color dot from, and then red, green, blue, and opacity, and then it's going to be 0, 82, 218, and then 1.0. And then I'll do Alt-Shift-F just to reformat my code. With this done, our icon button is also going to expect us to give it an on-pressed action, and the on-pressed action is going to be what happens when we press on this button. And what we'll do is that we'll call a function. Inside of this function, I'm going to access my authentication provider, and then I'm going to access its logout function, and that's all we need to do. And with this, I'm going to do Command Save, and you're going to see that now we should have our login button, this logout button displaying as well. The final and last thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to set a default font size for our top bar in the case that we do not provide a font size. To do this, I'm going to go to my named list arguments, and I'm going to say that if the font size isn't provided, then the default value for the font size is going to be 35. And then I'm going to do Command Save, and you're going to say this is instantly going to increase the size of our chat's title. So with this, I think it's been a fairly long video. We've implemented the top bar inside of our chats page. And with that, I'm going to end this video here, and I'll see you guys in the next video where we'll continue developing the functionality. So with that, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Thanks.